Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Minecraft Iceberg, created by user Probot748 on Reddit. Today, we'll be diving into part 4 of this series, uncovering widely unknown or forgotten features, scrap mechanics, and theories. Of course, we'll also be taking another step towards the depths of this iceberg, and with this video, we've officially crossed the halfway point. As I mentioned, this is part 4 of my series of videos discussing this iceberg chart, so if you're new here, or you need to get caught up, check out my Minecraft Iceberg playlist linked in the description below. Previously, we talked about the origins of several iconic Minecraft urban legends, like Entity 303 and Null. We explored the rumors of a new overworld boss, the Red Dragon, and we even went as far as to discuss the unsettling MD3 models used very early in development. We've got quite a bit to discuss today, several theories to break down, and more gameplay elements of past and present to discover. I'd also like to mention before we start our dive into today's lair, if you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and maybe even leaving a comment down below. As always, any interaction from you gives me the inspiration to keep creating these videos. Finally, if you like my stuff and want to see more from me, I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Twitch at 1 PM EST, link in the description. Okay, with all that said, let's unpack what this lair has in store for us. Missing no splash. In early versions of Minecraft, if you were to remove every line of text in the splashes.txt file, the only splash note shown on the main menu would read missing no. Missing no, meaning missing number, is a reference to Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, where by following a series of steps, you could find the infamous glitched Pokemon Missing No. In modern versions of the game, the Missing No splash has been changed to ZWNBSP, which stands for Zero Width No Break Space, and it's also pretty boring. Dragon Egg Origins. One of the countless unexplained features in Minecraft is the Dragon Egg and its mysterious origins. Since its introduction in Release 1.0, many players who've just beaten the Ender Dragon for the first time have been confused by the Dragon Egg, leading to endless theories. For years, people had been gathering online to discuss ways to potentially hatch the egg or just find any purpose at all for the item. There have been a lot of questions about the Dragon Egg since its debut, but one question that isn't asked so often is, where did it come from? Of course, we all know it came from the dragon, but how? There's only one dragon in the end, and although Minecraft has some unconventional breeding mechanics, there isn't another mob in the game that can reproduce by itself, unless you count chicken eggs. I tried, but I wasn't able to find anyone online discussing the origins of the dragon egg. Maybe one day we'll get to encounter the father of this egg, but for now, its story still remains a mystery. Mob perspective filters. We've already seen this entry previously in the iceberg, so I'm going to keep this short. If you go into spectator mode and spectate an enderman, a creeper, or a spider, your screen will change to match the eyesight of the respective mob. This was a leftover feature from the super secret settings button, as mentioned in a previous entry. Void Fog. Before version 1.8, if you were to mine all the way down to Y level 17, an ominous fog would begin to surround you. This fog would get thicker the farther you descended, until you reach bedrock level, at which point you would only be able to see a few blocks ahead of you. This was certainly an unsettling feature, only adding to Minecraft's natural horror/liminal feel. I mean, just imagine playing late at night by yourself and hearing those cave sounds while being surrounded by absolute darkness. But this feature was removed in version 1.8, as previously mentioned. This was due to a combination of performance issues and general community dislike for the fog. I might be part of the few who actually liked this fog back in the day, though. Personally, I would have loved to see a setting to toggle the void fog, as I can totally see how it could be really annoying, but I don't know. I just like unsettling things. Arbalistic. Arbalistic is a hidden achievement that can only be viewed once the player has unlocked it. This achievement requires you to kill 5 unique mobs with a single shot from a crossbow. Definitely an unusual task, so it's not surprising that it ended up this low in the iceberg. Axolotl Wardens. If you take the Warden mob and invert its colors, you get to see what vaguely resembles the color scheme of the pink axolotl. That's all there really is to this one. I did manage to find a singular fan theory about this coincidence. Essentially, the theory goes that a group of axolotls managed to wander their way into the deep dark biome. Due to the skulk and the harsh elements that surround this biome, the axolotls were infected with a parasite. This parasite then fuses the group of axolotls together, forming a rat king of sorts. They also develop a hive mind in order to better navigate their new environment. Through years of evolution, the axolotls eventually gained all the features of the Warden, including echolocation from having their eyes absorbed into their bodies, and of course, they began to resemble what we now recognize as the Warden today. Hidden splash text. Going back to the splashes.txt file we talked about earlier, there happens to be another uncommon splash note. This time around, there's no way you'd be able to see the splash note in-game. Rather, this seems more like an Easter egg for anyone who went through the game's files. This splash note reads, "This message will never appear on the splash screen." Isn't that weird? While it's true that this splash note, for whatever reason, never appears on the main menu of Java Edition, ironically, this note has no problem appearing on any other edition of the game. Also, bonus fact, this was the first splash note in Minecraft's history to not end with an exclamation mark. Nautilus are extinct. While you're busy fishing for Nautilus shells to craft that conduit in your world, you might have been struck with the question, where are these coming from? It's a great question. Since Nautilus don't exist in Minecraft, how are we able to get their shells? It's possible that long ago, during an ancient civilization's time on this blocky world, Nautilus were hunted to extinction for their coveted shells. Maybe their shells were used to craft useful items other than the conduit, like armor or tools. It would explain why we don't see any Nautilus floating in the oceans we have today, and why they're so damn annoying to farm for. Villager eye colors. If you've ever taken a moment to really lock eyes with a villager you're shoving into a prison cell to trade with for the rest of their life, you'd notice that throughout every variant of the villager mob, including all job types, the wandering trader, and even illagers, their eyes remain the same dark green color. There's only 2 mobs that break this eye color rule, those being the Witch and the Vindicator. The Witch's eyes, of course, match her background in magic with her potion brewing, and as such, are a faded purple color. The Vindicator, his eyes are blue. I don't really know how to draw a connection from his preferred method of killing to his eye color. Maybe he just likes wearing contacts, I don't know. Strongholds being abandoned. We've talked before about the theories surrounding the Minecraft world in general. A key point in almost all of those theories is the abandoned structures Steve finds throughout the world. One structure we haven't delved deep into the fan lore of yet is the Stronghold, so I guess it's time to remedy that. From the Stronghold's name alone, we know that these structures were built to hold up against attacks. Perhaps the entire purpose of the Stronghold was to guard the end portals. Walking the halls of the Stronghold, it's clear that a lot of time was spent here by whoever inhabited the structure. Entire libraries were constructed to entertain the inhabitants, or maybe even to study the end portal. Decorative fountains were built to make the cold, stone walls of the buried structure a bit more tolerable to live in. Cells were built with iron bars and doors, maybe to use as bedrooms for people that lived there, but more than likely were used to hold and interrogate any enemies that snuck their way into the Stronghold's entrance. With all of these man-made features, and the fact that the structure is buried so deep underground, it doesn't make sense why it would be left abandoned and infested with silverfish. It's highly unlikely that the people that resided here were all killed in an attack against the Stronghold. If the winding and confusing halls weren't enough to thwart the attackers' plans, it's possible that even wardens were used to defend the end portal, given their name's obvious connection to the Stronghold and their skin patterns matching that of the end portal frame. So, if these people weren't killed or didn't just leave the Stronghold, what happened to them? Maybe, during a severe raid on the stronghold, the people inside were backed into a corner. At the heart of the structure, they were forced to make a choice, either make a final stand against the attackers, or jump into the infinite black void of the end portal. We'll touch on this theory again in an upcoming entry, where we'll explore what happened to the survivors of the attack on the other side of the portal. Grassless dirt. Grassless dirt was the precursor to the coarse dirt we have today. Originally added in release 1.7.2, grassless dirt was only spawnable through commands. You couldn't find it in the world, and it was uncraftable. The block itself looked exactly like the regular dirt block, but of course it didn't have the ability to grow grass. The switch between grassless dirt and coarse dirt was made in the next major update, release 1.8, where grassless dirt was given a different name, texture, and a proper crafting recipe. Pre-activated end portals. We all know that end portals have the chance to include several Eyes of Ender already installed in their frames. Now, the odds for this are already pretty low. There's only an 8% chance that a portal will spawn with even just 3 eyes in its frames, and those odds only plummet from there. At 5 eyes, the odds drop to 0.38%, or 1 in every 231 strongholds. Keep in mind that in Java Edition, there's only 128 strongholds per world. With odds already this low, and not even reaching half of the 12 frames filled, you might be asking yourself, what's the likelihood of finding an end portal with all 12 frames filled? The answer to this is a staggering 1 in 1 trillion strongholds. With those odds, one might think it would be nearly impossible to find a seed with all 12 frames, but with the help of speedrunners and the Minecraft at Home team, not only has a seed like this been found, but the stronghold containing this 1 in 1 trillion chance end portal is directly underneath the spawn. Using this seed on screen, all we have to do in order to reach the stronghold is break 1 sand block. And just like that, we've already entered the end. And as a little fun fact, the current world record holder for the speedrunning category Enter the End has managed to use this exact seed to jump through the end portal in only 17 seconds. Brick pyramids. In version InfDev 2010-02-27-1, an unusual structure was added to the game. This structure, called the Brick Pyramid, was exactly that, a huge, completely solid pyramid made of brick blocks that spanned from the surface terrain to the height limit. These pyramids were added as a way to test structure generation, and interestingly, they could always be found in the same exact coordinates, regardless of the world. All you had to do was travel to 500x and 500z, and you'd always be met with this towering, ominous structure. As these pyramids were only added for testing, they didn't last long in Minecraft's history. In fact, they were removed exactly 1 month after their introduction. During the time they were in the game, the pyramids were the only way to obtain brick blocks, making many people believe that bricks were the reason these pyramids were implemented. Disk 11 and Cave 14 spectrograms. Disk 11 is the most unsettling music disk in Minecraft, and cave14.og is one of many creepy ambient cave sounds you can hear in-game. While both of these audio files are definitely unnerving, they each hold another secret that you can only uncover by running their audio through a spectrogram. A spectrogram is a piece of software that visualizes audio waves, essentially drawing a picture of whatever audio you put through it. It's a pretty common way for artists to hide messages and images within their music, and these two tracks are no different. Starting with Disk 11, by running the track through a spectrogram, we reveal a picture of Steve's head, accompanied by C418's autograph. Doing the same to K14, this time we get a clear image of the iconic creeper face. Of course, these have led to several fan theories. A pretty common one I saw was that K14 is actually audio of a creeper breathing. But, of course, these are nothing more than Easter eggs. Endermen are corrupted humans. This theory is yet another possible explanation for why there aren't any other humans like Steve in the Minecraft world today. Using a combination of other fan theories we've discussed earlier in the Iceberg, we can actually piece together a pretty cohesive story. Using the Enderman backwards speech theory, we can attribute some human qualities that still lie buried within the Enderman's psyche. Also, if we believe endermites are parasites, it might give us an explanation on how these transformations came to be. If the group that survived the attack on the stronghold jumped through the portal, it's possible that at some point during their trek across the End Islands, they were cornered and infected by the endermites, spawning a new entity that we can see today. Monoliths. Monoliths were a terrain generation bug that caused random pieces of land to suddenly generate up to the world height limit. This bug was active from version infdev 2010-06-11 until alpha 1.2.0. Looking at these structures today brings me a weird sense of almost adventure, I guess you could call it. I can just imagine using these monoliths as a guide for a really interesting base. PC Gamer Demo. The PC Gamer Demo was an altered version of Beta 1.3, which came on a disc included with the June 2011 print of the PC Gamer magazine. The demo gave players 100 minutes of gameplay, or 5 Minecraft days, though if you used a bed during that time, the night you skipped would count towards your time limit, reducing the amount of time left you had to play. The demo had a handful of unique features that couldn't be found in the full game. These include the first version of a bonus chest, a secret hidden chest just below the spawn that contained 22 gunpowder, special cow textures that had the PC Gamer logo on them, and finally, a giant PC Gamer logo built in the sky, similar to the tutorial world on Legacy console editions. Once the 5 days had concluded, a menu would pop up showing off community-submitted screenshots of builds and other interesting stuff, and ask the player to consider purchasing the full game. You can still actually find and play this demo today, if you ever want a small dose of 2011 nostalgia. Incurable zombies. This entry is asking the question, if we can cure zombie villagers, why can't we cure regular zombies? There's multiple different ways you could look at this. Maybe the zombies have been infected for too long for a cure to work, or maybe being a regular zombie is just a race you're born with in the Minecraft world. My personal idea is that each different variant of zombie, the drowned, husks, regulars, etc., they each have their own special recipe for a cure. We just only happen to know one of them. Moon phase effects. The moon in Minecraft actually plays a slightly larger role than just signaling that it's nighttime. The effect that the moon has on the world is usually determined by the fullness of the moon. For slimes, each different phase of the moon dictates their spawn rate in swamp biomes. For example, during a full moon you'll find the most slimes, but during a new moon you won't find any. The moon also affects both skeletons and zombies and their chances to spawn with armor or weapons. The fuller the moon, the more likely the chance. This can also affect spiders, giving them positive effects like invisibility. And finally, the last mobs to be affected by the moon are cats. During a full moon, there's a 50% chance for any cat that spawns to spawn with black fur. More end dragons existed. This theory claims that the ender dragon we can see and fight today wasn't the first of its kind. Judging by the dragon heads you can find on the end airships, and the fact that the dragon lays an egg, it's likely that at some point other dragons existed. Mojang did express an interest in adding more dragons to the game, albeit that was a long time ago. Maybe in a further end update someday in the future, we'll get to see more from the Ender Dragon. I just feel like there's a lot Mojang could do with the groundwork they've already laid out in the end. I mean, the door is always open. Ender Dragon enslaved Enderman. This is yet another theory. I did not realize how many fan theories are in this layer that claims that every Enderman is being mind-controlled by the Ender Dragon. Okay, this one's a really big stretch, fair warning, more so than any other theory we've talked about in this iceberg so far, but here it goes. This theory states that ever since September 13th, 2011, the Endermen have had their minds taken over by the dragon. You might be wondering why such a specific date, and it's because on September 13th, 2011, the Endermen had their eye color changed from green to purple, and exactly 1 month later, the Ender Dragon was introduced into the game. Now, because the end has no exit besides death until the Ender Dragon is slain, and obviously the Endermen can't kill the Ender Dragon, this theory states that the Endermen are trapped in the end, with the dragon giving them no chance to escape. Of course, we all know that Endermen can be found in every dimension, so them being trapped there doesn't make any sense. This theory makes up for that by stating they just escaped somehow. Yeah, I told you, this one sucks. The only real piece of evidence that has any weight to it for this theory is the fact that when you beat the Ender Dragon, you get the achievement Free the End, which could imply that the Ender Dragon is holding the End hostage, but that sentence is so vague there's a lot of different ways you could interpret it. I don't know, I might just be close-minded, but maybe this resonates with some of you guys more than it does with me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Monsters under your bed. In version beta 1.3, when beds were first added to the game, there wasn't anything stopping you from sleeping with monsters around. In modern versions of Minecraft, if you do try to sleep with hostile mobs nearby, you'll of course be met with the "you cannot rest now" message. Back then though, there was a hidden mechanic that arguably is a lot more fun than what we have now. From beta 1.3 until release 1.0, if you slept in a bed that was exposed to a potential hostile spawn area, essentially a dark place, then there was a chance you'd be woken up by a skeleton or a zombie that would be spawned right next to you. This was meant to be seen as a monster crawling out from beneath your bed, due to the player not checking their surroundings before laying down. Rabbit-scared Ravagers. For one snapshot of release 1.14, Ravagers, then called Illager beasts, were scared of rabbits of all things. If a Ravager were near a rabbit, it would attempt to flee the area, getting as far away from the animal as possible. As mentioned, this was changed in the next snapshot, and was never revisited. Human goat screams. Though this entry sounds unsettling, it's actually an interesting look behind the goat mob we got in the Caves and Cliffs update. Through a video titled The Secrets of Minecraft, Caves and Cliffs Part 1 on the official Minecraft YouTube channel, we learned that the audio for the goat screams in-game are actually a 50-50 mix of both authentic goat screams and human imitations. Now, I guess you get to play a little game every time you hear a goat in your world, trying to decide if the scream you heard was a human or a goat. Fun. Diamond tricks. For this one, I'll be combining the next two entries together, as the way they work is very similar. Due to the way Minecraft terrain generation works, for 80 to 85% of all 1.16 and 1.17 seeds, there's a link between clay patches and diamonds. If you were to locate a patch of clay submerged underwater in your Minecraft world, you could reliably calculate how many blocks away a vein of diamond ore was. To do this, you'd need to take into consideration the biome you're in and the direction you're facing. For example, in a 1.16 swamp biome, you'd need to first mark the center of the clay patch. Then you'd move around 7 blocks in the positive Z direction, or south. You'd also need to make sure that you don't cross over into the next chunk by hitting F3 plus G, but there's a workaround for this we'll talk about in a moment. If you've done everything right, all that's left is to dig down and find your diamonds, and you could do this to every single clay patch in that swamp biome. Now, the reason you have to stay within the chunk you started in is because of chunk wrapping, essentially meaning the chunk would stop itself from overlapping with the chunk next to it. It sounds complicated, but if you found that you couldn't move 7 blocks without entering the next chunk, all you had to do was go to the opposite side of the chunk and continue counting. Using this method would lead to a 50% chance to find diamonds for every clay patch you searched, and all it took was 8 blocks, making it extremely easy to find a lot of diamonds fast. In 1.17 versions, this was made even easier, as you only had to move 3 blocks south in order to have that 50% chance of diamonds in swamp biomes. And if this was still too much work for you, there was another method to reliably find diamonds discovered in 1.17. For this new method, all you had to do was find a vein of lapis lazuli. After that, move 4 blocks north and dig up and down to almost always find diamonds. As I'm sure you can imagine, this method of finding diamonds was a huge discovery for both random seed speedrunners and competitive Minecraft players, giving both parties an advantage over players who didn't utilize this trick. Giant fossil origins. Generating underground in swamps, mangrove swamps, and deserts, fossils are large skeletal structures made up of bone blocks. These skeletal remains are extremely large. There's no mob currently in the game that would even be remotely close to their size, which has left some players to question the origin of these skeletons. There's a lot of theories online regarding what creature these skeletons belong to. Some claim dinosaurs, others say they were giant mythical creatures at one point. But my favorite theory, and the one I personally believe, is that these skeletons belong to the infamous cut giant mob. The giant is the only mob in Minecraft's history to be large enough to house these skeletons. Not to mention, it would be a really cool nod towards Minecraft's history if this were to be true. The only question that still remains from this theory is, what were the fossils in the Soul Sand Valleys? Giants never seem to be planned for the Nether, but I don't know, maybe at one point there used to be giant zombie pigmen roaming the Nether wastes. Anything is possible. Legacy Frozen Ocean. Before the current frozen ocean biome we have today, where you can find large stretches of ice only interrupted by icebergs, there existed a different variant of the frozen ocean biome exclusive to Bedrock Edition. These legacy frozen ocean biomes are completely barren and flat plains of ice that cover the entirety of the ocean's surface. They're currently unused in all versions of Bedrock Edition, only being able to generate with the use of biome editors. This isn't to say that these biomes have gone completely unused throughout the different versions of Minecraft. In fact, the Legacy Frozen Ocean biome was fully functional from the very first version of Pocket Edition until version Alpha 0.9.0. Quantum Chests. If you take a second to think about it, it's kinda crazy that a chest can even store one singular block inside it, given that chests themselves are the size of a full block. This theory claimed that the fact you can store multiple stacks of blocks inside a single chest leads to the possibility that items inside the chest are being stored in quantum space. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know the ins and outs of quantum physics, plus if we went in depth for this stupid entry, we'd be here for the next 6 hours discussing Minecraft chests. I don't even want to think about the implications that ender chests and especially shulker boxes have on this theory. In Dimension is an asteroid belt. In our solar system, the asteroid belt is a ring of differently sized asteroids, ranging from as small as a pebble to as large as a dwarf planet. This belt orbits between Jupiter and Mars, with most of the asteroids themselves being up to 100,000 kilometers apart. Now, if you imagine the asteroid belt, it might not look too dissimilar from the end islands you explore after defeating the Ender Dragon. The islands themselves range in size, just like asteroids. Some are very small, others can house entire cities on them. Between and surrounding these islands is the infinite black void, which does resemble space. Maybe these islands are orbiting something we'll get to discover in a future update. But probably not. Old Stonecutter. Added in version Alpha 0.6.0, the Stonecutter was a block exclusive to Pocket Edition that allowed players to craft every stone-type block in the game. If you were around back then, you'll definitely remember using the Pocket Edition crafting menu, which was designed with touchscreens in mind, but it was very limiting. Not every craftable block would be able to fit inside this menu, hence why the Stonecutter came into existence. Mojang needed to split the crafting menu between different blocks. This allowed them to make previously unobtainable blocks craftable. Eventually, the crafting menu was updated to allow all blocks to be craftable through the crafting table, and in version Alpha 0.13.0, the Stonecutter was made unobtainable. Removed potion types. While developing the Adventure update, Notch and Jeb decided to implement a brewing mechanic into Minecraft, a mechanic that had been teased for over a year before version 1.0 released. Initially, brewing was going to be a very in-depth and complicated process. In a tweet posted by Jeb on October 2nd, 2011, Jeb states, "In the pre-release, there are 161 brewable unique potions. Unless we change it, there will be 2,653 with all ingredients added. Today, there's only around 28 unique potions, so what happened to the rest of them?" To answer that question, we first need to understand why there were so many potions planned for this update in the first place. On September 29th, 2011, inside the second pre-release for Beta 1.9, cauldrons were added to the game. At the time, cauldrons were planned to be the main block used for potion brewing. Brewing stands had yet to be implemented. To brew a potion in this pre-release, you'd first need to fill the cauldron with water. Then, by throwing in the correct combination of ingredients, you'd be able to brew a beneficial potion. If you were to incorrectly add ingredients, your potions would have negative effects applied to it. This allowed for hundreds of unique combinations of different effects, making up most of that 2,653 Jeb mentioned in his tweet. In addition to this, there were also 29 cut base potions added to the game, 3 of which were kept and are still obtainable to this day, those being the awkward, mundane, and thick potions. As I'm sure you could imagine, this brewing system was clunky and overly complicated. Just imagine if this system was used in combination with the scrapped idea of making brewing recipes procedural that we talked about in Layer 1. That would have been a nightmare. Notch and Jeb realized their mistake, and went back to the drawing board to come up with a better system. This of course led to the brewing stand and the brewing system we have today. With the switch to the brewing stand, the total number of unique potions dropped significantly. There were now only 25 different potions. So now we know about the cut mixed potion effects and the 29 base potions, but there was a final type of potion that existed all the way up until release 1.9. These potions had an effect called reverted. Essentially, a reverted potion was the product of taking a stronger potion and sending it back to a weaker form. For example, if you were to take a potion of weakness and brew it with redstone, just like any other potion, the duration of its effects would be increased. But in 1.8 and below, adding a glowstone dust to this now extended potion would revert it back to its usual duration. This process could be used to change the duration of several potions and weaken the effects of others, but the reversion effect was removed in a snapshot of 1.9, and has never appeared in the game since. Damage tilt is broken. When you take damage in Minecraft, you'll notice that your screen tilts momentarily. Originally, this was intended to be an indicator of where the player took damage from, as the screen would tilt in that direction, but after an error introduced in release 1.3.1, the screen would always tilt to the left regardless of which direction the player took damage in. This bug lasted for over a decade. In fact, the fix for this bug came out so recently that not even this Iceberg's creator noted that it was fixed. From version 1.3.1 until 1.19.4, the screen tilt was broken, making this bug one of the longest standing bugs in Minecraft history. Ender Dragon's name is Gene. Just like the origin of Steve's name we've discussed previously, the name of the Ender Dragon was also made up on the fly by Notch in response to a user on Reddit. In a thread discussing the Ender Dragon, user Lay_MadMax asked Notch what the Ender Dragon's name was. In response, Notch simply replied, "Gene?" Bloodstone. Similar to the trouble Notch had when deciding what to name the Nether Dimension, he also had some trouble finding the right name for Netherrack as well. Revealed in a Block of the Week article on Minecraft.net, the original name for Netherrack when it was implemented in version Alpha 1.2.0 was Bloodstone. This would be changed to Netherrack in version Beta 1.0, likely due to Notch's aversion to using blood in Minecraft. It's also worth noting that at one point on November 5th, 2010, Notch made a tweet that referred to Netherrack as Netherstone, but this could have just been a mistake and was never really considered to be an official name for the block. Cave ambience crash sounds. This is one of my favorite theories in the entirety of Minecraft, and it revolves around the unsettling ambient cave sounds you hear when you're near a dark place. We've all heard them before. Those creepy echoes and breathy noises when you're exploring a dark cave in your world. For most, these sounds are nothing but an eerie warning that monsters can spawn nearby, but a few creative people out there have strung together a story with these audio files, and honestly, you could convince me that this theory is what Mojang was aiming for with how accurate some of it is. The theory states that these cave sounds we hear are the remnants of a deadly minecart crash, trapped inside the walls of a cave, doomed to repeat itself for eternity. There's videos online that detail each and every one of the cave sound files, giving each a line of text explaining what the noise represents. For the sake of time, I won't go over the 19 different cave sounds individually, instead I'll package them together in order of events. We start with the file Cave 11, which gives us the sound of a minecart speedily rolling down the tracks. Many of the 19 cave sounds give the same effect. We can hear the wind moving as the minecart rushes through the cave, the sound of the wheels moving along the steel of the tracks, and even what seems to be a whistle warning anyone at the other end that a minecart is on its way through. Unfortunately, the whistle was far too late, as we can hear another minecart making its way up the tracks. Both carts are now hurtling at full speed through the dark, cold cave, directly at each other. Cave sound 17 is when this takes a turn for the worst, as we can hear a sudden, metallic crash of the two carts colliding, and in sound 18, we hear the carts fall off the track, hitting the stone below. The miners involved in this accident are killed, but not instantly. In fact, we can hear their final breaths in sound 13, and in many videos, you'll see claims that sound 2 is the angelic humming of their souls leaving their bodies. Flying squids. When squids were first added to the game in version Beta 1.2, they weren't without their fair share of bugs. The infamous flying squid is a classic Minecraft bug that many players look back on fondly to this day. But if you weren't around for this glitch, basically all you need to know is that squid were more than capable of rising out of the water and flying around the Minecraft world. This bug was mainly seen on servers. The desynchronization between the server hosts and clients allowed for unexpected consequences. Squids were initially coded to move with the use of a velocity vector, and when a squid would reach the surface of the water, they would be stopped, at least in theory. Server lag allowed for the squid to miss their cue to stop once they reached the surface, keeping their velocity intact and letting them soar through the air. This bug became somewhat of an unintended feature. Players loved it, and images of flying squids quickly filled the Minecraft forums. Mojang did attempt to patch this bug by not allowing squids to swim upward, but this only caused squid to get trapped at the bottom of the ocean, and at the time, squid couldn't despawn, meaning the player would have to go out of their way to kill the squid at the bottom of the ocean if they wanted any more squid to spawn. Thankfully, this bug was patched in release 1.8, and squid were given new AI, putting an end to both the flying squids and the trapped squids at the ocean floor. Woodland Mansion Cult. The Woodland Mansion Cult is a fan theory that gives an explanation to some of the stranger rooms you can find inside the Woodland Mansions and the illagers that live there themselves. The first and most damning example of this cult is the fact that Jeb himself said the illagers were outcasts of the village, potentially leading these outcasts to come together and build this mansion, away from the villages and free from persecution. Inside the mansion itself, there are many peculiar rooms that seem to be without explanation. That is, until you think of this building as a meeting grounds for the cult. You can find rooms with idols inside them, statues for the illagers to worship, jail cells to lock away anyone who disagrees with their plans, and even recreations of end portals, suggesting there might be an end goal for the cult. Along with this, many members of the illagers practice the dark arts. The evokers can summon vexes to harm anyone who intrudes their home, along with curing the totem of undying, which in and of itself is worth worshipping. There's other smaller rooms that might also give credence to this theory, but I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you think this theory is believable at all, and if so, what could be their end goal? Horse Armor Recipe. During two snapshots for release 1.6.1, when horse armor was first introduced, you could actually craft every tier of the armor with just one wool block and 6 of the respective materials. It hasn't been stated why these recipes were removed from the game. The Iceberg creator believes it was because horse armor can't break, making it better for chest loot. That being said, leather horse armor was made craftable, first for Pocket and Windows 10 editions only, but was soon added to Bedrock and Java in release 1.14, which I didn't know until now that leather horse armor even existed. I've never a single time crafted or even seen leather horse armor in all of my time playing this game. Ghasts firing at the camera. Before version beta 1.7, when Ghast shot fireballs at the player, they were actually coded to aim for the player's camera, rather than the player themselves. This meant by pressing F5 and going into third-person view, the player could easily avoid all fireballs, as the Ghast would be aiming above the player's head. Just want to throw in there that when Ghasts were first being developed, Notch stated that they would be, quote, the most unfair mob ever, and that players would hate them. Glad to see that really panned out for him. Ancient debris is fossilized trees. Buried deep under the hellscape of the Nether's terrain, ancient debris can be found in small clusters. Taking a close look at the texture for this block, it appears similar to the several different variations of the log blocks in the game. On the outside, ancient debris has almost a bark texture. It's very rough and jagged looking, but through the center, we can see several clearly defined rings, much like the ones found on other log blocks. Just like the name of the block implies, it's possible that these clusters of debris found underground are ancient, petrified remnants of what was once a tree, which gives evidence that maybe the Nether didn't always resemble hell. Now, in my opinion, I don't really buy this one. I think it's way more likely that Mojang was intending ancient debris to be seen as the pieces of long-lost ancient structures, in the same vein as Nether fortresses and bastions. Squid milking. When I mentioned earlier that squids had their fair share of bugs, I really wasn't kidding. During beta 1.2, while squids were still soaring through the blocky clouds, the squids had another interesting feature, and just like their flying capabilities, this also became a fan favorite bug. From version beta 1.2 until beta 1.3_01, using an empty bucket on a squid would give you milk. Squid milk, if you prefer to call it that. The reason for this strange bug, and the infamous flight glitch, was because the squid was the first mob Jeb had ever coded into the game. According to Jeb, to get an understanding of how passive mobs worked, he copied the code used for cows and used them as a base to create the squids. But once it became time to implement the mob into the game, he'd forgotten to remove the line of leftover code from the cow that allowed the player to milk the mob. Like I mentioned, this was very quickly patched out, much to my dismay, because I personally would have loved to drink squid milk. Guardians are mechanical. This is another likely true fan theory that suggests that Guardians are not living creatures, but rather machines with their only purpose being to protect the ocean monuments. This theory sprouted with the release of a video by the game theorists, in which they discussed nearly all of Minecraft's ocean mobs and their origins. Guardians, in particular, were looked on with suspicion. Their skin is the same texture used for prismarine, likely meaning they're made of the same material. The spikes poking out of their body are retractable, lasers shoot out of their eyes, and again, they fiercely protect their respective ocean monuments from any nearby players or mobs. The most damning piece of evidence towards this theory, however, lies within a piece of official Minecraft merchandise, specifically the Mobestiary. On page 54 of the book, Guardians are given an exclusive entry, and along with the paragraphs written on them, we're shown the anatomy of the Guardian, revealing that beneath their prismarine skin, there are indeed mechanical parts that allow the Guardians to fire lasers. It's unknown who made the Guardians and why they're forced to protect this desolate structure, but if you're interested in this theory, I'd recommend you go over and watch the full game theorist video on their channel. Modified Jungle Edge. There's plenty of rare biomes in Minecraft. Mushroom Islands, mesas, and ice spikes are a few that might come to mind. But if I asked you to name the rarest biome in Minecraft's history, I don't imagine many of you would say the jungle. Until its removal in release 1.18, the modified jungle edge was the rarest and one of the smallest biomes in Minecraft. This biome could only generate once specific conditions were met. You'd need two rare biomes to border each other, those being the jungle and the swamp hills biomes. If these two biomes were to border each other, a very thin line would be drawn between them. This is where the modified jungle edge would generate. Now, there really wasn't anything too special about this biome. The regular jungle mobs would still spawn here, along with pumpkins and melons. Not to mention that these biomes could end up being less than 10 blocks in length. As mentioned before, the modified jungle edge was the rarest biome in history, with a staggering 0.00027% chance to generate in the world. So, with nothing special occurring inside this biome, and it being so small, it's safe to say we didn't miss out on anything when they were removed. Zombie virus. Here we have yet another theory attempting to explain why the Minecraft world is so desolate. This theory claims that the Minecraft world was overtaken by a zombie virus, leading to the abandonment of several structures, along with the destruction of humanity. Today, we have very few human-like mobs left in the world, each of them finding a different way to survive the apocalypse. The pillagers and illagers likely used magic to grant themselves immunity. The evokers would cast spells to protect themselves and their people against the plague. The evokers would also use totems of undying to protect themselves, as they're the only line of defense left for their race. Witches also use magic to survive, brewing potions to defend their secluded swamp homes. Villagers went the science route, going off into the Arctic to use the elements as a protection against the undead horde. The zombies' rotting bodies would slow and freeze before they could reach the villagers. It's here in the tundra where they would build igloos as shelter, and where they would discover a cure for the virus. They'd trap their infected friends and experiment on them, until one fateful day when a cure was discovered, transforming the zombie villagers back into their original selves. They'd go on to spread this cure, rebuilding their population and starting new lives all across the Minecraft world in their villages. As for Steve, he was the one person that happened to have natural immunity, either a curse to watch the world fall apart around you, or a blessing just to survive. A final thought about this theory, it's likely that this virus is airborne, given the fact that pigmen and hoglins turn into their zombified variants the second they're taken into the overworld. This implies that the Nether and the End are virus-free, but it makes you wonder why there's still zombie pigmen roaming the Nether. Wake up. This final entry dives back into the story of a few people we haven't talked about since part 1. If you'll remember, at the end of the first video I made on this iceberg, we talked about Herobrine, his origin, and how he was made one of the most recognizable creepypastas in the world. In that video, I discussed the very popular Copeland stream, which, if you don't remember, was a staged Herobrine sighting captured by a streamer named Copeland. That stream played a big part in Herobrine becoming the widely known figure that he is today. And although Copeland did admit that his sighting was a hoax years later, it didn't stop him and others from trying to hold on to the popularity he'd gotten through Herobrine. At the time of Copeland's original stream, he belonged to a sort of streaming partnership between him and his friend, Patamus. Together, they would call themselves Brocraft. After Copeland's famous hoax, his friend, Patamus, wanted to get in on the popularity Copeland was receiving, so he devised his own plan, unbeknownst to Copeland, to fake a Herobrine sighting. In another stream, Patamus would stumble upon Herobrine in a very similar manner to the original sighting, walking into a room and seeing Herobrine standing in front of a door. This would then cause Patamus to run away frantically, until he would unfortunately jump into a pool of lava and burn to death, though as his health slowly drained, he would lock eyes with Herobrine one last time, as it watched him burn. Shortly before or after Patamus' stream, Copeland would paste a link in the chat to a website he had created named him.html. On this website, viewers would be met with an unsettling GIF of Herobrine with human eyes, and right below this video was a mix of numbers and letters. Decoding this jumble of characters would reveal a message, which reads as follows. It has been reported that some victims of torture during the act would retreat into a fantasy world from which they could not wake up. In this catatonic state, the victim lived in a world just like their normal one, except they weren't being tortured. The only way that they realized they needed to wake up was a note they found in their fantasy world. It would tell them about their condition, and tell them to wake up. Even then, it would often take months until they were ready to discard their fantasy world, and please wake up. After Patamus had died in the lava pool, the stream went down, only for Patamus to return shortly after with no further sightings of Herobrine. This hoax was pretty successful for a while, but this would all change when, in a later stream, viewers would overhear Patamus speaking to his wife about the incident, telling her that the whole thing had been a troll. This would enrage his chat, and in an effort to save face, he faked a game crash and continued to stream without any further mentions of Herobrine. This whole situation really disappointed Copeland. Patamus had never reached out to discuss his idea, which was clearly heavily inspired by Copeland in the first place, with Patamus' use of the retextured doors to appear as Herobrine. It would sadden Copeland even more when word got out that Patamus had ruined the mystery of Herobrine by bragging about it to his wife, which Copeland seriously disapproved of in his email confessing to his own hoax. Regardless, the him.html site only boosted the popularity of Herobrine, which, in the end, was another win for Copeland. The Herobrine with human eyes gif would be spread around on forums, and became another meme for the community to enjoy. Honestly, taking a look at this now, it's a wonder how anyone believed this. I mean, just look at how fucking stupid this thing looks. But I do really applaud Copeland for his determination to keep the mystery alive. It's a real shame Patamus ruined the reputation of the Brocraft streams. It could have led into a nostalgic ARG for fans to ponder about for years to come. And that concludes part 4 of the Minecraft Iceberg. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know it took a while to get out, a lot longer than I wanted it to, and I'm very sorry about that. I started working on this video as soon as I finished my last video that I uploaded, which was the Nick 56 video, and by the way, if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. But anyway, these icebergs always take a long time to get through. I usually work on these parts for 2 or 3 months, sometimes even longer depending on how many entries there are. And when you work on something for that long, sometimes life gets in the way, and there's not much that can be done about that, but I do try to get them out as fast as possible for you guys, because I know you guys really like this series. The last parts of the iceberg are doing extremely well on the channel, and I am so thankful from the bottom of my heart that you guys are enjoying these videos and leaving such nice comments. I read every single one of them. It means the world to me. But I don't want to get too emotional on you guys right at the end of the video. Funnily enough, this part was probably the hardest part for me to get through in terms of motivation, just because of the pure amount of like fan theories and weird, dumb entries, like the villager eye color one. I don't know why these are in here, but they just are, and I have to cover them. So yeah, sometimes it takes a lot of strength to sit and seriously script out a 12-year-old's fan theory from like 10 years ago. But I do try my best to make them sound good and believable, and sometimes I even have to come up with my own theories to add some more to them because they're like 3 sentences long. So I hope that I hope that didn't turn you guys off too much from this part of the iceberg. I usually don't take a look at what's coming up in the next layers, but I did skim through this time. And I will say there are a lot more interesting entries coming up that I'm pretty excited to talk about. So stay posted and look out for the next iceberg part coming out. I'm thinking there's going to be 2 more videos left in this iceberg before it's completely done. And we'll move on from there, figure out what we're going to do next. I do want to say it's probably going to be a little bit before we get back to this iceberg. Just because I want to put out a Halloween video, and I got to start working on that now, so I can get it out hopefully in time for Halloween. But if you're into spooky stuff, stick around, and hopefully you'll enjoy what I put out next. All right, I don't think there's much else I got to say. So I want to thank you all for watching again, and I hope you have a nice day or a nice night whenever you're watching this. But yeah, that's it.